In politics, when you see two fierce rivals sit down together, you know something big is up. And that's pretty much what just happened when Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's chief minister Ali Amin Gandapur met with Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. And let's be clear, this was not some friendly coffee chat. No, this was a super high-stakes summit, and it was born out of a real crisis. And wow, this quote from the chief minister really just says it all, doesn't it? This meeting, for him, wasn't about politics or scoring points. It was about his constitutional duty. He's saying the problems facing his province are so serious, he had no choice but to be there. Alright, so here's what we're going to break down. First, we'll look at why this meeting was an absolute necessity. Then, we'll touch on the one thing they definitely agreed on, fighting terrorism. After that, we dive into the huge financial disagreements. We'll also cover how they skillfully dodged a political landmine. And finally, we'll ask, what does it all mean going forward? Okay, first up, why did this meeting even have to happen? I mean, the relationship between the federal government and the KPK province has been pretty icy, to say the least. So what made the chief minister pick up the phone and ask for this face-to-face? Well, according to the chief minister himself, the answer was pretty straightforward. It was his duty. He basically said, look, I'm not here as a politician, I'm here as the person in charge of this province. The money problems and the security threats had just gotten so bad that politics had to take a backseat. It was a matter of necessity. Alright, now let's get into the first big thing they talked about, and it's an area where they found some immediate and really urgent common ground. And that's the growing threat of terrorism, which, as we know, doesn't care about provincial lines. And right after he offered condolences for a terrible attack in Balochistan, the chief minister came out with this really powerful statement. It sent a super clear signal. When it comes to the security of the nation, when it comes to fighting extremists, there's no room for political division. And look, the key takeaway here is that this wasn't just empty words. They actually talked about taking real, concrete steps, specifically creating a unified strategy. Both leaders seem to get that the only way to deal with this threat is with a joint federal-provincial effort, a truly united front. Okay, so that brings us to the real elephant in the room, the money. Beyond the security issue, the biggest point of contention for KPK is all about funds. We're talking billions of rupees that have been a major source of friction with the central government for a long time. So before we jump into the absolutely massive numbers here, we gotta quickly get our heads around a few key acronyms. The chief minister's claims are all tied up in these three things. The NFC, which is basically the province's slice of the national pie, NHP, which is its share of money from hydropower, and the AIP, which is vital funding for the newly merged tribal districts. And the amount of money we're talking about? It is absolutely staggering. Chief Minister Gandalpur is saying his province has already paid out over 100 billion rupees from its own budget to develop those former tribal areas. Money, he says, was promised by the federal government and never came. And this is where you really see just how deep the disagreement runs. When people bring up smaller figures, Gandharpur just dismisses them. Instead, he points to this enormous 5,300 billion rupee number that he says even the IMF has reported. He completely reframed the argument. For him, it's not just an accounting issue, it's about getting recognition for the incredible sacrifices his province made during the war on terror. But what's really interesting is the Prime Minister's reaction. It was surprisingly fast. He didn't just sit there and nod. He actually did something. He laid out this really clear three-step plan and immediately told his finance people to meet with KPK's advisor that very same day. That's a pretty big step toward breaking the deadlock. But of course, a meeting like this is never just about the official agenda, right? It doesn't happen in a political bubble. So once they were done talking security and finance, the press conference took a turn, right toward the political elephant in the room. So you can imagine the scene. The reporters jumped right in with a very direct, very loaded question. They wanted to know if the chief minister had used this rare opportunity to try and get access to his party's founder and leader, Imran Khan, who's currently in jail. But wow, Gandapur handled this like a pro. Instead of getting dragged into a political argument, he just sidestepped it beautifully. He basically said, hey, tomorrow's visiting day is for family and lawyers, not for political meetings, so the question of him going was a non-issue. It was a really clever way to avoid the question and keep the focus on his official visit. So after all that, where do things stand now? After the handshakes, after the press conferences, what actually came out of this meeting? And maybe more importantly, is this spirit of cooperation actually going to last? All right, so let's just quickly recap the big outcomes here. They agreed to work together on a security strategy. The Prime Minister gave an immediate order to start sorting out KPK's money issues, and they've already scheduled more meetings on both topics. And, just as importantly, they managed to keep the really explosive political stuff off the table, which allowed them to make progress everywhere else. And that really leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Was this a real breakthrough, a sign that cooperation is possible even in a fractured political climate? Or was this just a temporary ceasefire before the usual political fighting starts up again? I guess we'll find out. The next steps, those follow-up meetings, are going to tell us everything.